Welcome back to the Eye of Jupiter podcast. I'm your host, Tom Franklin, and today we have on a very interesting guest, Mr. Chris Kramer. I looked into the background of Mr. Chris Kramer on his Facebook. Wasn't much there, but it did say that he majored in cake tapping at Villanova University. Let's ask him about that in a little more detail. So, without further ado, let's welcome Chris Kramer to the Eye of Jupiter.
Hi, Tom.
Hi, Chris. Hi, Chris. How's it going? Please explain yourself, sir. How can you major? When you first read that, I was like, "Oh, he's an aluminum welder," and then it finally came to me, and I literally started laughing, and I wrote it down in my notes.
Yeah, the vagaries of a misspent youth sometimes come home to roost. When that's my lead-off talking point.
That put you on the spot, didn't it? Like right away, like, oh, okay. But when we were young, I was in the military when I was young. You may have went to college, but I joined the U.S. Army and went overseas. And then while I was over there, in Germany, I think the drinking age is 16, and I was 19 when I got there. So like it was like, so I did the same thing. So
it was
Chris, yeah. For the viewers, watchers, listeners of the Eye of Jupiter podcast, tell us a little bit about yourself. And if you're here to promote anything, I just tell all my guests, I don't think you are, but if you happen to be, please go ahead and do so.
I will. I'm kind of an anti-promoter.
That's what I figured as much.
The reason I'm here, I think, number one, Tom reached out to me a couple of weeks ago, and I wasn't even quite sure. I actually had to message him. How do you even know who I am?
True, he did.
I think we have some common interests and a couple common acquaintances. And I had so a little bit about me. Like I've been a Sasquatch experiencer for 30 plus years, and for the majority of that time, I've been very kind of low key about it. And in the last 3 years or so, due to some prodding from some people I think I'm fairly well connected with the people that are into this phenomenon on a deep level, and I got a lot of prodding to be a little bit more vocal and a little bit more outspoken about my experiences and kind of what I've gone through, what I've seen, and I don't know if that ever moves the ball forward for I really have no idea. But so as a result, I acquiesced to become quite friendly with Bettina Moss, who has a medium-sized podcast called Crypto Encounters with Bettina Moss, and her and I are close. And as a result, I became friendly with Josh Turner, who asked me for a couple of years to go on a show, and I politely declined for a long time. And Bettina kind of let me have it a few years ago, and she's like, she's talked me into it. So as a result, I've been a little bit more public, which is, kind of goes against my grain in a lot of ways, but I see the value in it sometimes, especially when coming on to. I went on Bettina's show because she was new and because she hadn't been, for lack of a better term, jaded or tainted by the community at large in this, especially the podcasting community, which can be a little rough. I mean, that's a rough crew. There's a lot of competition. There's a lot of maybe perhaps people that are in it for the wrong reasons. You know what I mean? And I felt like Bettina didn't have that going on. She was, an experiencer herself, and was willing to be open and talk about this thing without borders. Which I think is really vital, and that's kind of what led me to agreeing to going on a smaller podcast like yourself. I mean, I've had the opportunity to be on some rather large platforms, and I've declined it for a long time, and so I value something new. I value somebody with an open mind. I value the idea to be able to talk about these things without some set paradigm going into it that maybe Jay.
I think we might have lost him. Let's see. Chris seems to be jammed. I don't know if it seems to be working on my end. I will.
I'm back.
Wait a second.
Can you hear me?
Oh, there you are. Yes, I hear you. Oh.
There?
Yes, I'm there. I'm here.
How bad was that?
Hey, it's no big deal,
Okay.
man. We're going to roll with the
I
punches. It don't matter. It doesn't matter, my friend.
Yeah, I'm gonna switch over my source to my.
You're going to switch over to your phone, maybe?
Yeah, it's my hotspot. It'll be a little bit more effective than what I got going on here.
Okay, I might have to send. Just keep this one on. Keep this one on. Keep this one on.
So. Okay.
And then go ahead and come in with the phone, and then after you come in, and then you can bump yourself out on this one if you'd like.
Will do. Hang on.
No big deal. We got to. No worries, Chris.
Delay of the crane.
No worries. No, I'm just rolling with the punches, man. It's all new to me too. And like, if not, I think I have to send you a new link, and that's going to be a lot of fun. And we have to start from the beginning. Yeah, this will be fun. If I have to, I'll edit it. No big deal. If not, we don't.
Yeah, hang on a second. This thing's
no worries.
There we go. Boop. I'm not technically challenged, but on occasion.
I am. Very.
That's okay. Okay, I'm on with this. We're good, man. All right.
Okay.
Yep, that should be way better. All right, cool. Okay,
all right.
Back to wherever we hadn't really started off with yet.
No, you were talking about see if I can catch us up. You were talking about meeting. You were talking with going on smaller podcasts and Bettina Moss, and the reason. But yeah, that'd be wonderful. What is the reason why you? I mean, because of your experiences, you kind of. I don't want to like jump the shark here, but you told me a little bit about what you've seen or experienced. What was the catalyst? What was the thing that made you say, you know what, I need to speak out and to say something?
That's a great question because let me give you a little background on my current life and situations.
Sure.
That may give context to this question. Like I said, I had my first encounter 30 years ago. I was 25. It was the first and only time I ever went hunting. I was out in a place near the Wisconsin Dells with a guy who was a big gun guy and a friend of mine. And so he took me out, put me in a deer stand with another guy. Long story short, we saw a beam come up in front of us about 30 yards that flipped my wig. It was an 8-foot, dark-haired, hairy, ape-looking thing, and I'm by no means an aper, but and it kicked off an interest in this thing.
Chris, I'm sorry. What's an aper? What exactly is an aper?
So, within the loving Sasquatch community, that's not really the case, but there's really two camps, and it's
okay. Okay.
They've been at each other at each other's throats since I've been around this. There's those that believe that this phenomenon and these entities are entirely a flesh and blood creature, and that's been, if anything's been sanctioned, it's been that narrative that these are somehow some sort of lost, undiscovered North American ape that roams the woods, but yet we've never found a body, and we've never, it defies logic. And then there's what they refer to, and I hate this term, but it'll give context. It's called the woo, and the woo are those of us that believe that there is a paranormal aspect and more of a spiritual aspect, that there is a flesh and blood element to them, and something else. And, those two narratives have been at each other's throats in all my time involved with this. A lot of the bigger names that have made a name for themselves and had television programs finding Bigfoot, things like that, stick to the flesh and blood narrative, because they wouldn't go out to have a television program that promoted the reality of this, quite frankly. And
I think that's just very silly human bias stuff. I mean, just like let it be what it is, and what you experience. Okay,
it's absolutely the narrative behind these things, just like it is in a lot of interconnecting phenomenon, the UFO phenomenon. That narrative is strictly controlled, and so is this. So is anything that would give a hint to something that was beyond control or beyond under comprehension, and
all right, Chris, now you're speaking my language. Speaking my language. All right.
It's
I got
obfuscation and misdirection. It really is, and
great.
If you look at, there's bigger names in this. There's Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum, who was an anthropologist who has been given a platform for years, where if Uncle Sam or whoever they are is going to allow some things about this, it's going to be things that aren't true, but this man's whole premise is based upon the theory of a missing primate in our chain called Gigantopithecus, and the entire narrative is based upon a jawbone with some teeth that was found in China, and they built this ape narrative, a bipedal ape that existed thousands and thousands of years ago. Yet there's never been any evidence of this ape ever in North America, ever. So, yet that is that's the driving narrative behind.
I'm sorry, but I think that. Thank you for clarifying that, because I think some people may not know that, that there's some type of like civil war between trying to find out what really people. I mean, I don't know for sure. You definitely have more experience than 100% more experience than I have, that don't know what this quite is. So let's get into it. Let's figure out what it is. Excuse me. But, and I always find it silly, because being I used to be I still am a metal musician, a comedian. I'll be doing the open mic tonight in Spanish for my 4th time, so let's see how that goes. And in those communities too, there's people who just like, if you don't listen to this band or if you don't like this comedian, then you're stupid, and it's always the same silliness. So it's in everything that you get involved in. So I'm sorry to sidetrack you. You said you were the first and only time. Man. I think it was the first and only time.
Identified,
Thank you, sir. Thank you. The first and only time you went hunting was in the Wisconsin Dells, I think you said, and I think it was in the early '90s. And you experienced I think you called him when we spoke, a forest person, a Sasquatch. Yeah, okay.
I refer to them as forest people at this point. Okay. There's so many different names for these beings, but that one kind of is all encompassing as far as I'm concerned. So I go with that.
I was going to ask you that.
As far as person, when I saw it, I had no idea what it was.
You probably said something like, "Holy shit, what is that?"
I was me in my spot, man. I was absolutely. I never felt menaced, but it was menacing. You know what I mean? So
Right.
and that I think prior to that time, I'd seen the Patterson-Gimlin footage when I was a kid. Like I didn't really have a dog in the hunt, man. I had no interest in this. I mean, I've always kind of had a lateral interest in some esoteric things, even when as a child, but I didn't equate that to Bigfoot at the time
Right.
at all. And I had no idea what it was. And up until the birth of the digital age, there wasn't a lot to go on. You had a couple of books, and I think in the 90s.
There was also the Bog something monster. I think there was a movie, the Bog Swamp
the Boggy
Monster
Creek,
or something. Boggy Creek Monster, yes.
The monster of Boggy Creek. I mean,
yes.
Thing, man. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of those stories out. You know what I mean? And So as the digital age progressed and the ability to plug in, and before platforms like this, research became a little bit more accessible. People you could get alternate views and take a deeper dive into some of these things. I'm always hesitate even now. Like I swear, Tom, 30 years later, and I think I probably know less now than I thought I did 20 years ago. And I've had a lot.
That happens to all of us.
Right, and with this phenomenon in particular, there's so much out there now. As this topic, the cryptid topics, UFO topics, some of the occult topics, kind of drift from the fringe more into mainstream with the birth of platforms like this and YouTube and Rumble and TikTok and all these things where people are all of a sudden are gaining a voice, gaining an interest, and then. While it dilutes the gene pool a little bit, it also brings it brings experiences to light. I think the value these days is in the commonalities between the different experiences. That's where if we're ever going to learn anything, it's going to be looking for common truths and commonalities for me, which is something I always try and pay attention. I pay attention to very little people actually online at all anymore. Like I don't want to take anybody else's narrative and start parroting that. Like one of the guys from our group has a great line, which I really try to stick to, is don't let your paradigm dictate your experience. Let your experience dictate your paradigm. What you see and feel and witness your own determine your belief system and not vice versa. So many people look at some of these topics. It's hard not to look at it through, for example, a biblical lens, right? Because there is a lot of things in ancient scripture and other maybe non-canonical texts that give allusions to possible puzzle pieces when it comes down to the Bigfoot people in particular, So many people have latched on to that. And there was a time where I thought that may be exactly what we're dealing with here. I'm not so sure that there isn't an element to that, but I also, I do. I mean, there's a connection, but again, for me to say, well, one of the prevailing theories now is that the Sasquatch people and the forest people, Bigfoot in particular, are descended from the Nephilim of the Bible.
I've heard this.
I don't know if you're familiar with Genesis 6. Okay.
You're
hear it a lot now,
I've heard it. I know of it, but I'm not a Christian, you would say, but I am a man of God. So I don't know if that helps. But so when people enlighten me about their beliefs and stuff like things of that nature, I enjoy listening to them, to be honest with you. So yeah, the Nephilim, I think it's like fallen angels. Were with women, and they created a race of giants, and that's
correct.
Nephilim. Is this correct?
Correct. And then there's other. So that theory on its own, and the fact that it's almost completely glossed over by traditional organized theologies, ask questions too, right? Because why would they do that? Then you have the lateral texts of the Book of Enoch and the Book of Giants, which fleshes that Genesis 6 theory out a lot more. A book of Jasher. There's a lot of them. And so a lot of researchers fall into that trap. I mean, there was a guy who passed away last year by the name of Scott Carpenter. I don't know if you're familiar.
Scott Carpenter, yes, I know of him. Yes.
Right. So Scott wrote a lot of books, and I knew Scott somewhat, and Scott was a devout Christian, and
yes,
he came to his conclusions that the Nephilim descended theory was what he hung his hat on, right? So
okay.
And you know what? And it checked a lot of boxes, man. You know, it really did. You know, it matched that up with Nelba Ketchum's DNA study that Scott was a participant in, where you had the mitochondrial DNA being 100% human and the nuclear DNA being not in the genome, period. So an unknown species, you know, that could be correlated to a angelic being, you know, having relations with a human female and whatever their dissensions were. I mean, that's where that goes, right? So
it fits that paradigm, yes.
Right. So if something descended half-breed hybrid from that had maybe some abilities that the average you and I don't have, or maybe lost a long time ago, it makes sense, right? You know, I mean, it made sense. And that's always the concern, is that you're putting these things into some human logic that so that we can wrap our brains around it. That may be the furthest thing from what is really going on out there. Because there's a few things I know for certainty. These beings exist. I know. I don't believe that. I've experienced it firsthand for a long time. I mean, I know they do. That's the only thing really that I can say. And they are able to do some things that I can't do, that I don't know any human being can do. So that's two things that I know. After that, man, it's all theories and conjecture and educated guessing, you know, and that's the reality of the Bigfoot phenomenon. And anybody that claims expertise or claims that they know with a surety what's going on is dead in the water. They're full of it. There's a lot of. It's
like, how can you get your? What did you get? How are you an expert or something? What did you get your diploma at Bigfoot University or something? I don't quite understand that. So could you, Chris? I mean, you were saying
pet peeve.
I am a comedian.
That identifies himself as a cryptozoologist. I wonder, did you get that degree at Harvard, or you know, like where did that education come from? I'm a certified cryptozoologist. Okay.
I don't know. Nice. I don't know how that works. I guess if you run down to like the duck-billed platypus, because that was also could be considered a cryptid at one time, or the Tasmanian tiger or something like that. But other than that, I don't know. If it comes to the things, you know, Dogman and Wendigos and all these things,
lateral cryptids that are, you know, the skin.
So I want to back up for a second, Chris. I want to back up for a second. You were saying, okay, there's two things you know. You've seen these things exist. I believe you. I do. I really do. And the second one was they do things that we can't do. Could you maybe unravel that a little bit and tell me what do you mean by that?
I could try, you know.
Sure.
So,
well, if you're going to smoke, I'm going to smoke.
Oh yeah, I got a vape going, man. I put the Marlboros off to the side so I wouldn't like a complete jackwad. But
no, the worst.
My last vice, man. I don't drink. I don't do drugs, man. But caffeine and nicotine, they keep this heart pumping. So,
I know, my friend. I know.
Gross, right? So
no.
So honestly, about 5 years ago, I moved from the Northeast to the Southwest. I moved to Arizona, and I was so blessed. Like I have been a member of an online community that's engaged with this topic, a closed community for a long time, since its inception. And so I had a lot of connections that way too. And one of the guys that was a member of that group lived near me in Arizona. And so about 5 years ago, I linked up with him. And his name is Kevin Keeney. And he actually does have a YouTube channel called Arizona Squatch.
All right, go over there and go over there, guys, and go and give him some love and go check out his stuff.
Kev's a man, man. You know, I mean, he's not a big promoter.
No,
Yeah,
if for me, I don't know you well, Chris. So I'm going to be straight honest with you. I don't know you well, but you seem to be a straight shooter. And if you're saying this guy's legit, then I'm going to take your word for it, dude.
Kev's my best friend. He actually,
there you go, man.
He officiated my wedding in May. So
hey, congratulations.
Cool. Kev's cool, man. You know, Kevin had for lack of a better term, a team of guys. It was Kevin. There's another man named Chuck Jacobs who also runs a small channel, but it's a lot of RV stuff, some Bigfoot stuff, and two other guys that about 3 years ago got lost as the Arizona Four, and basically that happened because one of our guys wrote in some of our experiences to another channel, a really big one, How to Hunt, Steve Istow, and there's been an ongoing communication with Steve, and he labeled it the Arizona Four to give reference to who we are. And as a result of that, that kind of blew up, and we gained a degree of notoriety, unwanted, I might add, through that platform. So as I linked up with Kev, like the first time I ever went out with Kevin, like we do I hate the term research. I'm not a researcher anymore. I'm an experiencer. I guess it's a type of research, but it's different for me. I'm not trying to connect a lot of dots for other people. They're all for myself. Oh, wow. But the first time I ever went out with Kevin, we have a few spots up on, I don't know if you're familiar with Arizona at all, but there's a huge ledge referred to as the Mogollon Rim, and it runs east to west. And it connects. It's an elevation, and it drops down. The 260 runs across Arizona all the way to New Mexico, and it pretty much runs along the whole edge of this. And it's where three different national forests combined. There's Coconino National Forest, Apache Sitgreaves, and Tonto, and all of them vast wilderness. You know, so there was a man who passed away by the name of Mitch Waite. And Mitch Waite was one of the first YouTube Bigfoot podcasters when this thing was just kicking off 9 years ago, like seriously putting it out there on YouTube type stuff. You know what I mean? And he had a website known as the Mogollon Monster. The Mogollon Monster is a legend that goes all the way back to the Apaches in the area of it's a Bigfoot legend of this of a Sasquatch people that lived on the Mogollon Rim. So this guy Mitch had tremendous activity and success, and one of our guys, this guy Chuck, who actually started out and still is a researcher for the BFRO for Arizona, one of the only two in the state. And he started out as an aper, and Chuck gets on his knees and prays every day now. I mean, I've seen the full conversion for this guy. But Chuck got together with Mitch, and Mitch, before he passed away, bequeathed a few of his kind of really private locations to Chuck, right, where he was getting a lot of activity and a lot of encounters. So we had a little bit of a head start with that, and we had a couple of our own spots anyway. And over the last 4 years, you know, we've made our rounds through the summer, usually about 25 times over the summer for 3, 4, 5, 6 days at a whack. You know what I mean? We get out there. And the first time I went out with Kev was at a place called Hilltop 91. And I was out for 4 days. It changed my life. As much as I had been around this thing, the amount of interaction and things that I saw were just fantastic. And, you know, it started out with a degree of mind speak. I saw them in the full corporal form, flesh and blood. I was surrounded at one point by 8 of them in a semicircle around Kevin and I at night.
Wow.
There was too much to even really explain to you. This sounds like it come out of my mouth in public.
I can't even imagine.
That's insane. You know what I mean?
That's a question I want to ask you too, because I'm sorry to cut you off, Chris, but like you were saying that when you were young, you went hunting, you seen one of these things, and now you go out. What compels you to go out and do this? I mean, because I'm sure if you said it's the only time you hunted, I don't know, it's because you don't like hunting or whatever it may be. But I'm imagining it's because you were just like, I don't want to go out there and see this anymore. It was too much for me. And now in your later life, you're like, no, I'm going out there. What compels you to do that?
You know, A couple of things. Number one, I'm an outdoors guy, man. I mean, I'm a camper, I'm a fisherman, and I love to explore. I love it, you know, and I could be in a better state to do it, quite frankly.
Okay.
That, the camaraderie with my friends that are all kind of think the same way I do. That's another thing. And then just a need to understand.
Okay.
You know, like when these things flip your reality, and you know, a lot of people go in like one of two ways, man. They either try and divorce it from their brain and pretend it didn't happen, or maybe they take a deep dive. And it just kind of awakened a thirst for understanding in me that has never ever left me. You know,
okay. That's okay. That's
really the reason why, man.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not frightened. I've never had a negative encounter in my life. Never.
Okay.
Not one negative thing has ever happened to me. I've been a little rattled on occasion, but nothing where I felt something malevolent was
Okay.
around me. And I know that does not encompass the entire phenomenon, because there are people that have horrifying encounters that say they do, and you know what? I believe them. I believe them. I believe that that what I've experienced and what the guys from the Arizona 4 continue to experience isn't the beginning and the end of this thing. I think it's just a segment of it. You know what I mean? So
okay, yeah. Okay, I'm sorry. Then you were saying, okay, we were going into the things that it can do. You wanted the Hilltop 91.
So
you were out there. Your semicircle of 8.
I've seen these things go from a full physical, blink into an energy form, and disappear right in front of my eyes. I've seen
energy form. Energy form. What do you mean?
Yeah,
what do you mean energy form?
Orb forms.
Orbs. Okay.
So one of the things that happens. Yeah. Okay. Let me give you some context. One of the things that happens that seems to like either herald their presence or happens when they're around is we have this phenomenon we refer to as twinkle lights, right? So when we're out doing our thing, we don't have a campfire ever. We do everything in the dark, right? You let your eyes acclimate, and a lot of times we'll try and line it up with a good moon, but that's not all the time. But as your eyes acclimate and they start to show up, it looks like little LED lights, like little Christmas lights popping off in the forest. And it happens literally every time they show up, every single time. So we call it twinkle lights. That's what it looks like. You know what I mean?
I remember, this is in my former podcast. I spoke to Scott Pace, if you know who Scott Pace is.
I know who Scott Pace is.
And he was talking about the same kind of thing, similar, but his was more like, I don't know, like a carousel, like, I don't know, he called it, he has his own wording for it, just like you were saying, and I was like, that's very interesting.
A commonality.
Yes, a commonality, thank you.
Right, and it's for people that have kind of done it the way we do it, and in the vibe that we do it in, it's, I won't say common, but it's common enough. Like it's considered something that happens. You know, we see it on a regular. It usually, like I said, it usually heralds maybe some more activity. Sometimes that's all you see, and you don't, nothing else happens. And other times, you know, it goes off the charts. You know, they do what they do when they do it. You know, that's what Kev says. It's the truth. They do what they do. Everything's on their terms. Every bit of it is. You know.
Okay.
So one of the things that you know, like the telepathy that they seem to have is another feature of something that we don't know how to activate or do on our own. You know what I mean? But I've experienced it multiple times. I've experienced it with 4 other men sitting around that all hear the same thing that I hear in my head, and we say it out loud instantaneously because it's happened 50 times. Like, I'm not kidding. Like, this is a consistent. So last year, for some reason, the communication kind of died out to a certain degree. You just don't know what's going to happen. You don't know. But for a long time, we were getting really consistent. You know, we have a list. Not all these things that come out of my mouth on prefaces again always sound nuts, but I'm just going to speak my truth.
No, I don't think they sound nuts at all.
We've kept a list of names that we're allowed to refer to them as, you know, and like 37 to 38 of them, yeah. And there's a commonality amongst those names, not all of them, but some of them, that all have the suffix of the word Ghan in them. Gahn, Ghan.
So,
That's how it's
suffix,
pronounced.
Prefix, suffix. Okay, that's the end.
Terragan.
I had to go back to English. You sent me back to English school again because I'm down here learning my third language, Chris, and I was like, what was that again?
So, but this is really interesting. This suffix of their names. So, our understanding is that there is a bit of a caste system amongst these people, and they are a people.
Whoa.
And the Ghan are considered the elders and the leaders of who they are. So we've had these names, and you know, a good 8 or 9 of them have the term Ghan at the end of it for whatever reason. We don't really understand, but we understand that they're more of a they speak for their people a little bit more than just whatever.
Okay.
So about this happened. We've had these names for 4 years. So about 2 years ago, myself and Kevin are walking with our friend Chuck through the Payson Museum. Right, Chuck is a curator there, or a guide there at the Payson Museum. So he's walking through a section that is dedicated to the native people from the area in Payson, which are all Apaches. And the Apaches. So we're reading this placard that we'd never read before, and Chuck had never seen it. And the placard talks about the Apaches revered the spirits of the mountains. They were spirits that could take physical form, but yet they were also able, they had different abilities, they had healing abilities, and they were considered overwatchers and over kind of protectors of the Apache people. So in the area where I live, they have the 4 sacred mountains. There's a beer named after called the 4 Peaks, right? There's Mingus Mountain, the San Francisco Mountains. There's 4 of them that are in. All those mountains are considered sacred, not just the Apaches, but the Navajo, the Hopis, all the local tribes, and they all have very common stories. So the Apaches referred to these mystical beings that lived in the mountains as the Ghan. Exact same spelling. So
how do you spell that? Is it G-A-H-N or
H-N? Yeah, if you actually Google the Ghan, it'll come up in Apache lore. But what I did was, I mean, we made the connection that the specific entities that were giving us names to call them that had the term Ghan, it was identical to the word that the Apaches used to describe them.
Talk about, you know what I mean? That is a crazy commonality, Chris. That's beyond that goes through time, culture. That's incredible.
It is. It is. It was such. I hate to say that. You know, we're always sometimes in our brains thinking, "Are we just crazy?" You know, or like, seriously, you know, I mean,
every day, Chris, every day.
I mean, seriously, you know, when this stuff's happening, and then, you know, you sit back and you try and process some of these things. I mean, it's like when things like that happen, that gives some validation. Not that we need it, but when it happens, it's really sweet. You know what I mean? It kind of backs up the things that they're not lying to us, because that's always, you know, just because everything's been good and kosher doesn't mean that I'm not capable of being greatly deceived by something else. You know what I mean?
Doesn't it also make you wonder, like, you know, because every native culture or every culture has a beginning story. It makes it, maybe it gives a creation story that it gives that a little bit more weight itself. You know, where they say, you know, everyone's different, of course, but, like, you know, if you're going like, okay, this is matching up with this.
Absolutely, man.
So maybe this is also real then too. That's cool. So cool, dude.
Absolutely.
So cool.
I have for years immersed myself in native lore and multiple different tribal lore and culture to look for, you know, the hubris and the arrogance of Western civilization to be on this continent for 260, 70 years and to dismiss 8,000 years of native tradition and culture is absolute stupidity, you know, because they didn't have text, they didn't have paper, they weren't able to write these things down other than in petroglyphs. And I am a huge petroglyph guy. You know, it doesn't discount if these sane, rational elders who have embraced themselves in these traditions and their belief systems for thousands of years, who are we to dismiss that unilaterally as uncivilized, savage rubbish? It's the epitome of arrogance, man. You know, it really is.
Because like as you well know, I'm down here. No worries, man. No worries. I'm down
You're
here.
In Mayan land, bro.
I am. Yes. Down here. My girlfriend is 100% Mayan, and her grandmother spoke Mayan. And there's towns here that only speak Mayan. They speak Spanish too. Don't get me wrong. But you can go into towns here and they're speaking Mayan. And if you've ever heard it, it is very interesting. I've
got theories on that too.
Okay. All right, let's go, Chris. Like I said, this is an open format. We can talk about anything you want, man. Anything.
Yeah, the Mayan stuff to me, Mayan, Aztec, and Olmec and Incan stuff to me is absolutely fascinating. The history of Mesoamerica, from what we're taught, and the reality of it is there's such a huge disparity in the truth that I could spend the rest of my life trying to unravel that box, man. You know, I am so addicted to that culture and to their belief system. I have taken a huge dive in all of it, man. You know, there's a guy.
Yeah, you can go walking. Like, you know, I live off grid. I don't know if I told you that, but I live off grid. I live like 3/4 of a mile off the road. And sometimes you got to watch out for, coral snakes and all. I'm in the middle of the jungle here. I take my machete because it's absolutely necessary. It's necessary. Oh, people think it's just some kind of weapon, but you can't move without a machete here. And you'll be walking through the woods and you'll just run across like a little stone circle, or you'll run across some type of like rock formation in the middle here. And it's every
doubt. Oh, it's
so many things here.
Oh no, the culture behind it to me is the mystery. It's the absolute mystery that. So, like, we were just in Chichen Itza a couple of weeks ago, right? And
okay, yes.
So the Grand Citadel in Chichen Itza is actually built over another pyramid inside of that you cannot
access. Isn't it?
Yeah, but
isn't there like 3 of them?
Layered upon layered upon layered.
Yes.
So there's an entranceway that you can actually access the pyramid underneath the pyramid that had found some really bizarre things. There's a lot of researchers that I pay attention to. One of them is a guy by the name of Timothy Alberino. Familiar with him?
No, I'm
not. Tim Alberino, fantastic. He grew up at 17. He kind of divested himself of Western civilization and moved and lived among an Amazonian tribe for about 5 years. He lives in Montana. I just got finished reading his last book. It is brilliant. And he is a devout Christian, but some of his theories regarding cultures in North America and in Central America and South America are riveting, because there's enough physical evidence to support a lot of what he says. Another man by the name of Steve Quayle, who is actually an archaeologist. He's been doing a dig on private land in Oaxaca for the last 5 years.
Okay, Oaxaca. Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. So Steve is pulling out artifacts out of the ground because you can't do it on public land in Mexico. They won't allow it. But on these farmers' lands, he's pulling out things, and it's so cool the way he's pulling out artifacts that are Egyptian artifacts out of the ground in Mexico.
So, okay, Chris. You're going to be episode 4 for me. On episode 2, I spoke to a guy named Thomas. He's got such a strange name. It starts with a letter that's. Go back and look at it. It's Thomas, and he is in a place called Aguas Calientes, and he is on a place where he's pulling out artifacts out of the ground that had aliens in them, dude.
Steve Quayle, same thing. Aliens.
This place is.
I mean, it's real.
Mesoamerica is unbelievable.
Oh, the hidden history and culture of Mesoamerica is one of the great untapped resources that we have to move forward with, man. It's the truth. It's the truth.
Every time they throw LiDAR down here, and they go over the canopy here, they find something. This might be Guatemala, which is what, like 4 hours from me?
Right.
And
all connected.
Yeah.
Highways highways.
This might be the old world. Because if you look into the Amazon, the hyperspeciation of the trees there's like 2 trees, like a coconut bean and another tree. So that means it's a garden that got out of control. Maybe the Garden of Eden is over here, and we just, and then I don't know. I'm not trying to,
anything's on the table,
Christians
man.
or their belief. It's all open now. I think this is a new age of discovery. It's a new age of discovery, and it's so. Yes, that's why if you see in my intro, I said lost history because I love it.
I am, the traditional academic narrative of Egyptology, Mesoamerican history. It is such hogwash and it's all starting to really evidence himself. They just can't. The genie's out of the bottle with these things, man. It really is.
That's how they make their money. That's how they make their money. They had certain ideas. They had something, that was whatever. I don't know when. Maybe the 50s, the 60s, maybe before that, and they built their whole academic career on it. They wrote their books, and then that's how they make their money. So now they go, okay, we're not going to do science anymore. Yes,
they'll die on those swords, man. But
and that's crazy.
Guys got like Graham Hancock and Tim Alberino, Ellie Marzulli.
Oh, I love Graham Hancock.
Yeah, Graham's the best, man. All these guys that are, you go all the way back to Eric von Däniken if you really want to, because he's kind of like the granddaddy that was looking at these structures going, there's no way, like that was 50 years ago, Chariots of the Gods. I mean, that was, we all need to read that book, I
haven't, but now I'm going to.
Chariots of the Gods, that's vital reading. So when I'm in Oaxaca, there's a relief.
I read Fingerprints of the Gods.
He's got a series of them, but Chariots of the Gods is the first one.
Go ahead. Okay, all right.
Just a perfect example.
So Oaxaca, okay, this guy is.
No, I'm not in Oaxaca. I'm in Chichen Itza, and I take a picture of a relief. And what it is, the relief is a hybrid human with an upper bird torso and a beak, almost like an Osiris-looking Egyptian depiction.
Okay.
In Mayan architecture. So, and as this thing is holding one of these pine cone looking items, which many people
Chris,
they believe is a depiction of the pineal gland, right? That may or may not be.
Gland.
So
well, you can also find the same pineal gland in so I'm sorry, dude, but you get me excited, man. You're a great guy to talk with. The pineal gland, you can also find that in the Vatican. There's a huge.
Right. It's actually literally the pineal gland is actually genetically identical to a human eye inside your brain. It has a retina, a cornea, all that stuff. I mean, it's an eye. You know what I mean? And they knew about it. Anyway, I digress.
Okay.
Where I was going with this was that I'd seen that before, and I went online and I pulled up a Sumerian relief of literally the exact same figure holding this pine cone pineal gland from 7,000 miles away on another continent and another culture, supposedly.
Yes.
Identical to this relief at Chichen Itza. It's literally identical. I'll send it to you. It's incredible. I mean, I've seen that before, but I love it when I find things like that. You know what I mean?
You ever seen the reliefs of the dudes holding the little bags?
Oh,
they're all holding these little bags.
They call them fertility bags. I'm familiar with it. You know what I mean? And and I don't know that it wasn't tech. You know what I mean? I've got a picture of a. This will sound a little bit crazy, but I've got a. Back when I was still filming, we don't take pictures and we don't use video ever anymore. We made a promise we wouldn't. We stopped doing it about 3 years ago. But back when I was heavily engaged in that, I've got a picture of a Sasquatch-looking entity with one of those bags around its hand. I mean,
are you kidding me, dude?
No, I'll send it to you too. It's I've got all.
Okay, just send it on a private. I won't share any of this stuff. If you say, I'm not going to post it up here because it's your private stuff, but I would love to see that, and then I will in the next episode tell people like, yo, it's legit. If you don't tease me with a good time, Chris, because that would blow my mind. That would be the most.
All right, messenger to you before I hang up, man. I've got all this stuff. I've got a lot of these guys like hang their hats on their ability to timestamp. I did that for a long time, years and years and years of taking pictures. I always knew where to point the camera for whatever reason. You know what I mean? So
Okay.
I always felt like it was an ability. And then I realized it's not an ability. They're frigging everywhere. All you have to do is look. Like anybody literally could do this. I believe that, again, I'm digressing on this, but
No, Chris, rock.
About this narrative that's changed down in Mesoamerica. I mean, there is without a doubt. So Alberino believes in what they call the Nephilim migration theory, right? Now, Tim is a big Nephilim guy. And I'm not so sure that he's not right on some of these things. So he believes that the Phoenicians, who were great mariners, were descended from the Nephilim, from a Nephilim tribe. They started in the Middle East, worked their way to Malta, where there's so many history of the giants that lived in Malta, and then worked their way across the sea into North America, Central America, and South America. So he refers to a lot of these ruins down there as Nephilim architecture. There is a absolute knowledge of things like trigonometry that we're taught they shouldn't have known, right?
Right.
Things that you could only know, astrology and astronomy, you could only have known from having an overhead view of what you're doing. Chichen Itza, Tulum, perfect examples. When you go into the great courtyard of Chichen Itza, have you ever heard them clap and it bounces off everything?
Yes, I've heard about it.
The acoustics in this place are mathematically perfect. So you could stand at the top of the citadel and speak in a regular speaking voice, and people 600 yards away from you could hear you absolutely.
I've heard of this.
That's incredible. That's incredible. That's not some, by accident design.
Right.
I mean, that was designed that way.
It was purposeful, yes.
How would they know that? How would they know how to do that?
Right.
Absolutely. Then you get into the stories of Quetzalcoatl and some of these other Mayan deities that match up with some of the Nephilim stories as well. When I was at Tulum last year, there's a bloody 6-fingered handprint slapped onto the side of the main temple of the Tulum site. And I mentioned it to the tour guide, and they had literally no answer for me, but it's there. Again, that goes to the traditional Nephilim, depiction of the 6-finger, red-haired, double-row teeth, whatever. But and I've seen that 6-fingered thing in petroglyphs and all kinds of things, so who knows, man? I think there's some validity to it, I think there's truth in the Bible. I think there's truth in a lot of these things.
Yes. There's that I'm not saying, oh, no, that's not my deal. But I'm not saying you just said that either. But I was just thinking when you were saying that the giants and the Phoenicians, and then the first thing I thought about was the Olmec heads. Those large heads they're finding in Tabasco.
Absolutely. Look, Easter Island, all these things, man.
Yes.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Fantastic.
The Olmec heads, those giant with the big lip things, and I mean, there's.
I'm not going to put you on the. I'm not going to put you on the spot, Chris. I'm not going to put you on the spot, but
put me on the spot
in the future,
man.
I think me and you are we're going to definitely have to come back to this because we went on a tangent that we both seem to really love. And maybe say in a couple months you come back on and talk some more.
Tom. Every bit of it.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. I love picking your brain because you are very knowledgeable.
I'm happy to, man. I'm having a good time.
Me too, man. I really am. I really, really am. And
I put my time in, man, Joe.
Yeah, and this is what I'm doing too because it's not only it's educational, not just for me, but hopefully the people who watch this. And you're definitely going to have to come back on, man. And I appreciate you so much for coming on. I'm going to leave it on a bit of a cliffhanger. Stick around for a second, dude, and we'll talk a little bit more after the show. And I want to thank everybody out there for watching the Eye of Jupiter podcast. Let's see, how do I do this again? Let's go to.
Thanks, everybody. See you again, man.
Thank you. Later, buddy. You have been listening to the Eye of Jupiter podcast. If you have any strange occurrences, stories, or witnessed anything out of the ordinary, don't be afraid to send me an email at theeyeofjupiterpodcast@gmail.com, and maybe you will be on the show. And please remember, We are the eye, and we are aware.